We continue our discussion of the Vav consecutive plus the perfect. As we were saying, a form like ve katav is ambiguous. It could be interpreted as and he wrote, but depending on the context, it could be interpreted as and he will write. There are, however, some forms where there is a distinction of the accent, particularly in the first common singular perfect and the second masculine singular perfect. What will happen here is if it's a regular form, the accent will be as in the paradigm, u pakadti, but when it is a Vav consecutive, it will be ve pakadti. The accent shifts forward, and the Masoretes shifting forward the accent is their way of indicating to the reader that it should be interpreted as a converted perfect or as a Vav consecutive plus a perfect. Now, when you have a Vav consecutive plus a perfect, the perfect will have the same range of meanings as the imperfect, and it's up to the context to determine exactly how you will translate it. So if in context you think that yil kod oto means he will capture it, well then the context would probably tell you that this is ve saraf oto, and he will burn it. That looks like both of them should be translated similarly. On the other hand, if you begin something like with an imperative, Shema Yisrael, hear O Israel, and then you continue with ve ahavta, and you will love. Well, and you will love will have an imperatival sense based on the context where the sequence begins with an imperatival verb, and the imperfect, one of the meanings of the imperfect can be, you are to, you must, you should, that kind of thing with an imperatival type sense. Now the verb haya, which means to be or he was, is often used in narrative sequence. So when you have a preterite form with it, or what looks like an imperfect form, you'll end up with the third masculine singular would be vayahi. So vayahi baboker ve yishmor, and it was morning and he kept. Now, if you want to be literalistic about how to translate it, you would translate it something like, and it came to pass. And it came to pass in the morning, and then the next vav you would translate as something like that. And it came to pass in the morning that he kept. Though you could smooth that down and just say, in the morning he kept. Now that's not literal, but that is the meaning of it, and that would also make for much smoother English. So, as a beginner, you might want to translate pretty, woodenly, literally, and it came to pass in the morning that he kept. But once you get a little more used to the formulations like this, you could jump all the way to in the morning he kept and not be literal. The Vav consecutive of Hayan the perfect will behave in much the same way. Again, if you want to translate literally, Ve Haya Boker Ve Halakta would be translated, and it shall come to pass in the morning that you shall go. You masculine singular. Again, this is, you can tell it's Vav consecutive because the accent has shifted forward. And it shall come to pass in the morning, that's a little unnecessarily wordy. And so once you get the meaning of it, you could paraphrase it and give the correct sense of it. In the morning, you will go. In the morning, you will go, and not translate the and it shall come to pass thing. Well, I hope that hasn't shattered your world too much. It's kind of a complicated thing, this Vav consecutive stuff. But in the long run, it's actually not all that hard to translate. You just have to get used to it for a little bit. We'll go over the vocabulary. Lakah, to take or receive. The imperfect is irregular, although he's not going to introduce that until lesson 34. Malak means he became king, or he reigned or ruled. Rakav means to ride, like to ride a chariot or ride a horse. The imperfect is yer kav. Certain verbs have A-class vowels in the imperfect. Ones with gutturals, the guttural will make them so, but other verbs just do. As far as nouns, you have Evan, which means stone or rock. It happens to be feminine. In the plural, it looks masculine, though. A lot of gender confusion in some of the nouns in Hebrew. Avanim would be the plural form. Chutz means the outside, like the great outdoors. And then chesed is one of the most important theological words in the Old Testament. He suggests the translation loyal love, or back when I translated for Holman Christian Standard Bible, they suggested faithful love. Traditionally, it's often been translated loving kindness, but it really seems to mean something like the love, or the grace, or the mercy, or the favor, or the like, that one shows to someone with whom you have a relationship. And hence this is a covenant word that has to do with the loyalty that you show someone with whom you have a relationship, a covenant type relationship. And so love and mercy and loyalty and faithfulness, and it's all mixed in there. And there's really no easy English equivalent. Loyal love tries to catch two parts of it, but in context, sometimes it's to be translated differently. Midbar is the word for wilderness or desert. And then Mishkan is the word for tabernacle or dwelling place. Erev is the word for evening. So I could say Erev Tov, good evening. And then pri is the word for fruit. A few other forms. Bahavor is a preposition meaning for the sake of, or because of. Ba'avor. And then Kohen is actually a participle, but it's often used substantively as the word for priest. Well, the exercises, you're going to practice translating into Hebrew, first using the perfect tense, and then using the preterite plus a vav consecutive. So basically you'd say we broke, and then you'd have, which would be a perfect, but then you'd have the vav consecutive and we broke in order to do that. So you do that all the way through. And then section B, you'll translate into Hebrew, first using the imperfect, and then the perfect plus a vav consecutive. And then finally, actually there's 4 sections in this one. Translate into Hebrew using the vav consecutive forms to continue the narrative sequence. So again, it's playing with this new concept of vav consecutive. And then you also have a translation section here. For the rest of this video, let me translate a few sentences from Clement's supplementary exercises for Ross's grammar. So number 1, you have Yer kavu al susehem Yaradu el hamachane. So Yer kavu is a imperfect. There's no vav attached to it, so it must be translated as a imperfect. They will ride al upon susehem their horses. But then you have yaradu. Yaradu would be a verb in the perfect, a cal perfect third common plural. And because it begins the sequence with an imperfect, this should be interpreted as a vav consecutive. And so you will translate it not and they went down, they descended, Yerad, but rather and they will go down, El, to Mahaneh, the camp. So that's number 1. They will ride upon their horses and they will go down to the camp. Number 2, halaknu ha midbara ve nirosh et Eloheinu. And so here you have a perfect first common plural. We went, and then midbar is desert. Midbar is the desert, but then you have a kamatz he at the end. Remember what that kamatz he is? That's the he directive. And so it means they went towards the desert, to the desert. And then you have a vav with a patah under it and a doubling of the following consonant. So that indicates it must be a vav consecutive. And darash means to seek. So we will go into the desert. And then this is a cal imperfect or a preterite, first common plural with the vav consecutive. And we will seek et Eloheinu, we will seek, direct object marker, our God. Number 3, Malak ben HaKohen be'ero ve'yishpo et amo. And this is he reigned, cal perfect. Who reigned? Ben HaKohen. So the son of the priest reigned, ba'iro, in his city. But then you have a vav with a patah and a doubling, followed by a form that looks like an imperfect. So that's got to be interpreted as a vav consecutive plus a imperfect or a preterite. And it means shafat is the judge, and he judged et amo, his people. So the son of the priest reigned in his city, and he judged his people. Now I don't have time, but the next one begins with bayahi, and it came to pass, which could not be translated along with the vav, or it came to pass that. It came to pass in that night that I will rest. Well, we'll stop there and hit wrote.